All right, people, what's going on? Another Sunday, another Talkin' Lost recap. We have our first. I don't even know how to describe this one because it's not quite a flashback. It's not quite a clip show episode. It's our first alternate perspective episode. This is our first episode of Lost with no flashbacks at all. Because the entire episode is basically, for lack of a better word, a prequel spinoff where we see the alternate perspective of. We spent all of season one with this one set of characters. Then we're introduced to this other set of characters that were also on the plane with them as well. The tail end survivors of Oceanic Flight 815. Of course, when we're introduced to them at the beginning of season 2, they are very brave. They are very defensive. They are very on guard. And there's only 5 of them, as opposed to however many there are of the mainstream survivors that we met in season 1. And we come to find out in this episode, after the shocking events of last week's episode, kind of what happened to them in the 48 days that took place between the start of the series and now. Hence the title, The Other 48 Days. So, Luke, what are your thoughts on this episode before we dive in? And we're also going to be talking about some of the announcements that came out from CinemaCon this past week.
Yeah, it's the second or third time this season that we've done hey, remember the last episode? Okay, we're going to lead back to that exact point, but from the other perspective. So,
yes.
And the no flashback thing, that gave a glimpse of what the show would be like, and it would be a lot less interesting without the flashbacks.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All of that and more on today's episode of Talkin' Lost. All right, Luke. So the other 48 days, like I said, is our first, not technically our first alternate perspective, wherein we spend the entire episode with this new batch of characters that we've been spending the last 6 episodes getting to know very progressively, very slowly. And we come to see why they have been acting the way they have been acting, why they are so hostile, why they are so defensive, why they are so much less inclined to trust our main 3 survivors that they've encountered up until this point, that being Sawyer, Michael, and Jin. We saw at the end of last week the unfortunate collision that had unintentionally been building up to, with the unexpected death of Shannon. And I'm not saying that this episode justifies Ana Lucia's actions, but it definitely gives us a little bit more context, especially since this whole episode kind of acts as, like you were saying, what this episode, what really this entire season has been building to, which is, again, kind of taking a couple of episodes to explore the same set of events, but just from an alternate set of characters' perspectives. The second episode, Adrift, followed Locke and Kate as they descended into the hatch and their encounter with Desmond before Jack ended up finding them, the way that Man of Science, Man of Faith ended and such. And this is kind of a similar instance where we open this episode and it's just a still shot of the beach for a couple seconds. And I mean, it's pretty obvious to figure out what's going to happen here, where it's like, this is when their section of the plane crashed on the opposite end of the island. And then we see it's relatively similar to our main section of survivors. The only notable difference being they landed in the water. Our main set of survivors landed on the beach. So you see all the characters, primarily Ana Lucia and Echo, rescuing everybody, and progressively you see, the other characters we've been introduced to, Libby, Bernard in the tail end section, and then a couple of notable additions. You have this guy Nate, who everybody immediately doesn't like or doesn't trust. Then you have this other guy Goodwin as well, who we're introduced to, who's a recognizable familiar face. For people who may not know, that's Brett Cullen, who portrays the one senator in The Dark Knight Rises. I can't remember his name, the one that Catwoman kidnapped, and then he also portrays Thomas Wayne in the Joker movie. He's been in a couple of other things, but those are probably the 2 most notable things that people would know him from. And automatically, I feel like that's kind of our indicator as far as like, okay, I mean, this just being me and like this being my second time that you've watched the show. I don't know. Did you think that it was him, or did you think it was Nathan that was the infiltrator for the others, the way that Ethan was with our main group of survivors?
No, I thought it was Nathan.
You really thought it was Nathan?
It seemed plausible, but then as the episode went on, okay, this he's being a bit fishy. I almost called her Letty. I will definitely call her Letty at least 3 more times.
That's gonna happen a lot throughout this season.
Ana Lucia is like, hey, give me the knife. Like, I want to show you something. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe she suspects something.
Yes.
Like, oh, I thought Nathan, Ethan, that's close enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the end, it all makes sense. As soon as he like twisted the neck, I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's the giveaway.
Maybe he's just like really like adamant about this guy.
Nah,
But,
that's
but,
the giveaway.
but
Like, and
yeah,
also the way that he snaps that dude's neck with such ease. For me, the giveaway, this being the second time, obviously, that I've watched this episode, the giveaway is the fact that, so those first couple of others, so obviously, again, it shows that they were attacked, I think, like the first night that they're on the beach or something by the others. And it shows the others like dressed in, kind of those kind of haphazard clothes. For me, the giveaway was the fact that Goodwin's clothes looked very similar to the other. Like, he didn't look like he was dressed like a civilian that came from the plane. Obviously, our first encounter with him is when him and Ana Lucia find Bernard strapped into the chair in the tree that he's able to get out of right before the chair collapses, strapped, next to the passenger next to him who's deceased. That immediately was like the giveaway where I'm like, oh wait, Brett Cullen's in this episode because it had been so long since I saw it. And then I had a brief flashback. There's a moment where in season 3 that we will see coming up where you see the others and you see, Goodwin, Ethan go and infiltrate their 2 camps. I'm like, that's right, Goodwin. He's the other infiltrator for this side of the camp, because the others, what happens is when the plane splits up in midair, they see that the plane is landing in 2 separate sections of the beach, and they're like, okay, they're like, Goodwin, you go to this one, Ethan, you go to that one. And so I thought that was that was just a kind of a spark from my memory. Like I said, we won't see that until that moment comes full circle in season 3, which is the season that we spend a majority of the time with the others. The others are still kind of being built up as this hostile force that live on the island at this point, and we're kind of using the tail end survivors to really show what these figures are capable of. In terms of the mainland survivors have really only had like sporadic interaction with them. Their kind of focus has just been like figuring, their progressive backstories and figuring out what the island is. With this tail end group of survivors, they're the ones that were really, really fucked over badly by the others, but there's a lot of important lost lore that's also dropped here as well. You had the first mention of the lists.
What I like about the tail end survivors is that it's basically the opposite of what happened to the front end. It's like, okay, this is everything that happened to the front end. How can we make that like the opposite? Just it's way worse for them. Like they get attacked immediately first night. They have to move inland immediately, just like accelerating it to what we got in like a whole season. We get in one episode here. So
Yes.
So that's really well executed on their part.
Yes, indeed. And it's almost, I feel like it's kind of in line with the whole theme of this season, if you will. Again, we've been talking about how these first couple episodes have really just been kind of alternating perspectives of things that we already saw, which one could argue is weak storytelling. I like to think the stance that it's interesting because alternate perspectives are crucial in terms of understanding certain events. One set of events could be perceived entirely one way by one person, but it could be something completely different to another person. And so kind of how that, again, this is the button season in the hatch, this whole season revolves around, okay, we have to enter in this set of numbers every 108 minutes and push execute or the island might explode, the whole thing of, and then there's the whole thing of like, oh, is it real? Will anything actually happen if we don't do this? This whole kind of take on perspective, again, the man of science, man of faith episode that sets this whole thing up, Jack is like, everything has to be real. Everything has to have a scientific, logical explanation. Locke is like, there is something bigger than us. We have to kind of put all of our faith into this one thing. And I've been saying this whole time about how, again, like the whole, I guess, Wright's perspective, if anything, is to have the perfectly down the middle balance, ultimately, not quite entirely scientific, not quite faith-based anything, but like having a little bit of both ultimately. And this whole season, I feel like, which is summed up kind of perfectly in this episode, is this whole, again, alternating perspectives, opposite viewpoints needing to kind of come together in order to kind of fix the bigger solution, which is, of course, how do we survive on this island? How do we get off this island? How do we figure out who these people are that are attacking us, that are, again, coming in the middle of the night and stealing things from us, but rather sporadically? And then once Ana Lucia figures out who Goodwin is, what he's really capable of, that he's the other infiltrator, which, again, I don't know when she exactly figured this out, but I feels like, again, once Nathan mysteriously vanishes and dies in the middle of the night, after he was the one that everybody previously suspected, after Goodwin was the one that was kind of fingering him to be potentially the other infiltrator, where he mentions, the kids are fine, as we see, obviously, in the last episode, in, I think 2 episodes ago, whenever it is, when Echo and Jin are going into the jungle to try and find Michael, and they see the others walking past them, and they see the kids with them. So the kids have obviously been taken on over with the others now. And you're kind of in this position of, okay, the others took the kids, but they're fine. supposedly, according to Goodwin, and based off of the evidence that we already saw. So we're kind of led to the, and then Goodwin mentioned something about a list. And you're like, that raises all sorts of questions, obviously. Again, me having seen Lost before, I know what's going to happen. But what went through your head when you heard that? You're like, oh, a list. Like, what have they been like? Have they been tracking them? They've been like pursuing them. Like, does this potentially relate to them? Like, did they know? Did the others know the plane was going to crash? Like, it's kind of again one of those instances where again a lesser kind of thought of episode in the overall Lost lore, because again, everybody always thinks of the big ones, you know, the numbers, the Looking Glass, the LaFleurs, the Constants in season 4, which is a very crucially important one. But I do constantly forget that the most crucially important pieces of Lost lore are introduced in the episodes that people kind of tend to overlook. So I just wanted your take on that.
Yeah, even if we've been dealing with these others for about a season and a bit, like we still like know very little about them, and just any kind of lore drop is like, whoa, okay, I need to remember that there's a list. Nathan, he was not a good person. He was not on the list. Everyone else was on the list. Why would he not be on the list? But the kids are fine. What does that mean? What do they need these kids for?
Right.
Do they need to like continue the mission or whatever for generations to come? That's why they need the kids. So it just keeps me engaged. And when you do get a lore drop, it's like, oh, okay, feel like I'm being rewarded
yes,
to keep watching. And yeah, just how you mentioned the multi POV. I think watching Lost is definitely inspiring my own writing project, because in my story is 2 POVs and they're solving the same thing in different methods, and in the middle they meet up and then they're gonna solve it together.
Oh, I
So,
like that. Oh, I'm already liking this. I'm loving it.
So Lost is already influencing my stuff.
Yes, I love the biggest takeaway that we can get from this whole experiment is like Luke being like, oh man, this is really inspiring my own storytelling creativity here, which again shows Lost is a great show. Lost was ahead of the curve. It was always ahead of the curve. And I am very, very sorry to everybody who I initially doubted and said, it wasn't that good, because I could not have been more wrong. The show is great. This is one of the best shows ever made. Anybody who says, oh, it's dumb, oh, it dragged us out and didn't give us any conclusions, you were not paying attention. I've been saying this since the beginning. You were not paying attention to, because the show answered all the questions. It does. You just had to be along for the ride and paying attention, because again, it's a classic mystery box setup where again, not all the answers are going to be satisfying. That's just unfortunately it's what you're going to get with certain mystery box shows, you know? And I'll tell you this much, I prefer a show like this over a show like Westworld, where Westworld became so afraid of its own identity of being its own mystery box show that it went so far left to try and get away from it, and to try and get away from the sleuths who were figuring everything out before the show could reveal everything, that it just ended up kind of crashing and burning ultimately. Like those second 2 seasons 3 and 4 of Westworld, don't even resemble the same show as seasons 1 and 2 once they've actually left the park, you know? And my whole thing is, I would rather a show stick to its guns and give us some answers that people may or may not find satisfying, you know, than shows like Westworld, or even worse, shows like Game of Thrones. That's a whole different thing right there as far as what happened there. So back to Lost real quick. Like I said, it's you have kind of everything tying together. And even at the end, too, they do this really where after Ana Lucia's killed Goodwin in a very, very entertaining fight and very, very entertaining kill that we've definitely seen before, where they're rolling down a hill after punching each other, and then Ana Lucia grabs a stick and impales Goodwin as he falls right out. It was very, very funny. I forgot it was one of those Lost death clip show montages of like some of the silliest deaths that we've seen. And obviously, again, a 5-second clip taken out of context is going to be hilarious, but in the moment, it's like actually kind of like, whoa, it's sickening. You're like, man, this is on network TV. This is kind of crazy. I don't even think that Lost had done a kill this crazy yet, you know, other than like Charlie shooting Ethan in the chest a couple of times in last
Art
season.
kind of just blew up with a stick of dynamite.
Arts blew up, yeah, and that was done for laughs, very purposefully so. But what's it called? But this was not a death that was done for laughs. This was kind of again a confirmation of, oh wow, like these others, they are still here. They come in all shapes and sizes, and it shows how it is interesting too. Again, talking about this alternating perspective thing, how you know. Our main group of survivors had this revelation where they're like, they dealt with Ethan. They were like, oh, okay. And they kind of just like went back to surviving and building the raft. Whereas Locke was kind of the only one that was reminding them like, yeah, there are other guys besides Ethan and we should be wary of them. And it wasn't really until the finale when they were like, okay, we're going to take this dynamite and blow up the hatch. And then they blew up the hatch and they were now consumed by the thing with the button. And they almost all but completely forgot about the others and the threat of the others, because they become so focused on this hatch. But this tailing group of survivors, they're only thinking about the others, like that's been like their whole sole focus as far as them moving inland. You also had, I thought, some great moments with Echo, where Echo the first night is saving and looking after the children. All of a sudden these guys come, you see Echo, he like had a fight to the death where he was able to kill two of the others, and then he's like almost going on like this kind of quest on it of himself where he turns into what's his character's name, the actor, I can't remember the actor's name, but Billy, the Native American guy from Predator, where he's like the only, where the thing about Billy in Predator is he's the only character in that whole movie who kind of realizes that what they're up against is not human and something unnatural that they've never come up against before. And he's kind of the only one that's really able to like understand intuitively what the Predator is. And I feel that's kind of what Echo's doing in this episode, where he is like, I don't know what we're up against, but they are not human. He's like, they were not on the plane with us. They are kind of otherworldly. They understand this island in a way that we don't, because we just got here and we're still kind of like in the whole like panic survival mode. Again, Ana Lucia is able to remember that Goodwin came out of the jungle dry, wasn't even in the water, but she doesn't put two and two together until like days, weeks later. I feel like Echo is like that, but he's ahead of the curve a little bit, but he's also so traumatized by that his response is to just kind of separate himself and keep himself isolated. You see him taking off his shirt. You see him like adapting to the wild, snapping off the tree trunk that's going to become his big stick. That kind of becomes his weapon of choice. I just wanted what was your take on that whole thing? That was the thing that I was paying attention to the most this whole episode. And Echo, to me, is like the most interesting of this new batch of characters that we've met, and not just because it's played by one of my favorite actors.
I really love Mr. Echo as he's come to know, because that's the thing. Like, you come to this island not by your own choice, and like you can almost kind of reinvent yourself like with this new environment. And I feel like Mr. Echo's sort of mystery really adds to that, because he doesn't really talk to anyone for weeks. There was that great scene with where Ana Lucia finally breaks down and Mr. Echo shows up. Like, he finally starts talking. So he's just a really interesting new dynamic to this already very colorful cast of characters. Like you've got your leaders, you've got your Ana Lucia. She's like very stubborn and very like conflict driven, and then Mr. Echo, who's like, okay, he doesn't seem like he'll help you, but he's kind of a softie on the inside as well, because he'll go help Jin find Michael and things like that. So
right,
it's like what you least expect, and that's exactly what he is.
Exactly. Yeah. And you'll find that out once you get into his backstory as well. He does have this very, again, he's the gentle giant ultimately at the end of the day. He is not afraid to throw down when he needs to, but he is very kind of emotionally intuitive. He does have this kind of understanding. He is willing to help others when he senses that they are in need. He also does have this, for the most part, has this very good sense of who is telling the truth versus who is a liar. He does also have this inherent philosophical sense to him as well. You're going to see once now that we know that this group of characters has officially rejoined with our main group of survivors, especially once you see him going, kind of finding this mutual connection with Locke. You'll see that's going to create for some very interesting dynamics that's going to carry us through for the rest of the season. So, yeah, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a really interesting episode where, again, even though it is kind of, again, you can make the argument it's another filler episode, it's another flashback episode, it's another, like, alternate perspective episode. It's like, no, it's like all the pieces matter. And actually seeing what this group of characters went through in their own first 48 days before they had their interaction with our main group of survivors, it is worthwhile, and it is noteworthy in terms of adding to and building out, again, the world of Lost ultimately. So that's really all that I have to say about this episode. Like I said, it was a relatively shorter episode too, as well. But also because, again, the CinemaCon was this past week, and there are a lot of big announcements and drops both at the conference and outside the conference. Unfortunately, some major movie drops. CinemaCon is usually the big kind of quarter two conference that's held in Las Vegas every year, where basically all the movie studios come out and trot out their like kind of upcoming slate of projects for the next couple of years and for the year in general. So couple of big drops there, some footage that was released both online and not. So that's really it. Luke, you have anything else you want to say about this episode before we get to the CinemaCon stuff?
No, just a great episode, and with some slow mo flashes at the end there, just catching us up to
Yes.
the present of very 2005. Just like,
Yes.
hey, we need like 3 more minutes in this episode. Can we
Yeah.
just like, okay, we'll put like black screens every second and just slow
Yes.
the footage down.
Yes, and
Oh,
it's so funny that you brought that up because I just completely forgot. It's like we started covering the show last year for its 20-year anniversary, and I just realized that I'm like, oh my god, 2005 is 20 years old this year. Like we're getting to the point now where it's like the early 2000s are always kind of like a little bit wavering for me because I was a little kid during that time period, but now we're getting to the point now where it's like years that I have like vivid memories of because I was like no in that weird space between like being a little kid but not quite being a little kid but not quite being like a preteen, like that 10, 11, 12 period. We're coming up on those periods because like that period, that 5-year period of like 2005 to 2009, like I remember those 4 years very vividly as a kid. And the fact that those years are getting to be like 20 years old is just like disgusting to me. So yeah, I'm sure you'll feel that way too once
yeah,
we get to like
I'm feeling that with like 2015 right now. I'm like,
yeah, yeah. Well,
The Force Awakens was 10 years ago.
how do you think I
Oh,
feel? How do you think I feel? That was senior year of high school
I'll
into
get
freshman
there.
year of
I'll
college for
get
me.
there.
So trust me, I'm right there with you there. All right. So first couple of things. It's weird again, just showing the difference and breakdown between the people who work in the industry versus the fans who just kind of follow it on the YouTube space like us. Because for me, I thought the Sony announcements the first day topped everything else that happened at the festival. Like we're going to talk about other announcements that were announced at the festival, but I feel like other than after that first day with the Sony announcements, everything, and maybe this was just again first day hype, but everything else that was interesting for me that happened that was announced this past week did not happen at the conference. It was movie news that happened independently outside of the conference that just happened to be taking place during when this massive conference was taking place. So I thought that was kind of interesting. The biggest, obviously, announcements for that came during the Sony announcement, confirmation of the Beatles cast. You know, we knew that Sam Mendes was doing this 4-part Beatles movie series, all that were going to be released in the same year. Each one that was going to be about a different member of the Beatles. I assume that I'm like, oh, they're just telling the story of the Beatles, but from 4 different perspectives across 4 different movies. The fact that he was going to be directing all of them, we had heard rumored casting, but this past week we had confirmation that of the 4 Beatles, it was confirmed again. 3 of the 4 castings that had been rumored last year were confirmed. Paul Mescal as Paul McCartney, Barry Keoghan as Ringo Starr, and Harris Dickinson as John Lennon. And then the 4th casting was announced, unfortunately to nobody's surprise, the guy who's just been being cast in everything now, Joseph Quinn, aka Eddie from Stranger Things, aka Johnny Storm, the new Human Torch, will be the 4th Beatle, George Harrison. And all 4 of these movies will be released in April of 2028 in what Sony has announced as being the first bingeable movie theater experience. I just wanted your take on this whole thing because my thoughts on it. I was talking about this with Nathaniel the day that it was announced, and I was talking about him. He was already talking about like the chance for what these movies have Oscar wise, and I'm like, we got to talk about just this release format in general because this is a whole new thing that will impact the business going forward of movie theatrical releases.
To me, the one appeal of it is like, okay, no one's ever done something like this before, releasing 4 movies at once. From a money making standpoint, I don't think it makes any sense. You're gonna make 4 movies, all of that won't be too dissimilar from each other because same director, probably same writers. Just, you're gonna make the same movie 4 times and release it all on one day. Like who's gonna watch all of those? Like people are gonna probably pick one, like their favorite Beatle, and go to that one. And then like we'll rank the Beatles by monetary value. There's been some great memes about like what each one should be. Um, like I'm not a huge Beatles fan. Like I just hope there's something else to watch in that April because I don't think I can sit through 4. Maybe I can sit through 1, but the way music biopics have been going, like no, thank you.
I've got a little bit of a devil's advocate take on this because again, there's so many different perspectives with which to take on this. Again, the general idea in and of itself, the fact that movie theaters actually would go for this, the fact that theaters are desperate and really, really are trying anything at this point to get people to come back to the theaters. The fact of it's a lot of different things you have to take into account because there's the whole there's again the financial incentive, the business decision, but then there's the creative decision as well. And I want to take it from the creative decision making first, which is that again, the whole, man, I don't even know where to start with this, but okay. So like you were saying, music biopics in the direction that in general that they've been going. The idea that, again, they have to turn these music biopics into these giant jukebox musical events in order to cater to the boomer crowd, who are the ones who grew up with these guys, because they seem to be the ones that come out to these movies. It's the strangest thing ever. Like, I will never, ever forget the craziest thing ever being when I worked at Dollar Tree in 2018 when Bohemian Rhapsody came out, and listening to people my grandmother's age saying that they went and saw the movie 4 times in theaters. 4 times. I'm like, you have the energy to like leave your house to go to the theater that many times. Like, I will never forget that. That is one of those things that is like a core memory in my mind. So that's the first thing that you have to take into account. The second thing is the fact that the Beatles, not only have they never gotten the straight traditional biopic, but it's almost like one of those things where I believe that they themselves have always said that they did not want the traditional straight movie biopic, as well as the fact that Beatles fans, I feel like amongst the music community, even of themselves, even in and of themselves, are like kind of a breed of their own, you know, where again, like the Beatles have almost amassed this kind of like cult-like worship, even more so than like, say, fans of like Rolling Stones or AC/DC or any of the other, or Van Halen or any of the other giant bands that, you know, kind of like have this massive influential wave, you know, the Bob Marleys, the Kurt Cobains, all of the world. Again, these figures that have become like these messianic like figures within the music space ultimately. And the Beatles have kind of always held that weird space. You know, another interesting weird example is the Who, where the Who, but that's different. The reason why the Who has never wanted a biopic is because they themselves said that the one member, I can't remember if it's John, I think it's Pete Townsend. They even said that like, yeah, there's nobody that can capture the crazy energy that this guy had on film. There's been attempts at capturing the Beatles stories. You know, they did a ingenious parody take on the Beatles and Walk Hard, which is still, again, to me, the thing that should have ended music biopics because of how great that movie is in terms of parodying the genre before they even became the tricks and tropes of the genre. They did Across the Universe, which I've never seen, but that was like a take on the Beatles. You also had, obviously, what a lot of people consider to be the best adaptation of the Beatles story, the Peter Jackson docu-series that they did on Disney Plus during COVID, the Beatles Get Back, which again used a little bit of Peter Jackson's de-aging and as well and recovering footage that had never even been seen before from the Beatles recording sessions. So that I feel like was considered to be the what's it called, the go-to take in terms of capturing the Beatles on screen. What I'm seeing with this take is it's a couple different things. One, they're trying to do a take on the Beatles story that is different than all of the traditional music biopic. They're trying to kind of escape a lot of the trappings that a solo music biopic would probably fall into. That's the first thing. The second thing is they're trying to pay kind of cult homage to the cult that is the Beatles, because that's what I'm going to call them. Because again, you interact with any fan of the Beatles, they act differently the way that they talk about them, you know? Even to the point where people have said, they're like, yeah, when the Beatles came on the scene, they like knew, they're like, whoa, this is a whole different sound that's never, you know, even been seen or heard of, you know? I also forgot about Danny Boyle's Yesterday as well, but I'm not going to talk about that. So that's the second instance. And then from the financial incentive, from the theater's perspective, as far as how they are so desperate, they are really leaping at any ploy to try and get people to actually come and see movies in theaters as opposed to waiting for it on home. As far as the whole bingeable theater experience, I could see a world where they market this in a way of come and see like this different concert experience, you know, where again, these 4 presumably 2-hour long movies, you know, but I can also see a version where again, it's like, because you know how they'll have that thing where it's like, oh, people will come and like watch all 23 Marvel movies leading up to Avengers Endgame, you know, obviously we would not be psychotic enough to do that, but there are people who would go and do that. I see this as something along the lines of that, where they're like, okay, this is not 4 different movies. That's not what this is. This is one continuous, presumably 8-hour long movie. That's what this is. Again, this is not going to be 4 different movies about each different member, a backstory of the Beatles. That's not what this is. This is the story of the Beatles spread across 4 different movies, told from a different perspective of each one of the Beatles. But all 4 of them are going to be in each and every one of these movies. Let's get that out of the way right now. You know, and then obviously, again, it will cover a certain period of time within each one of their lives. There's already a rumor also that Mikey Madison could be portraying Yoko Ono, which is so problematic for so many different reasons. But namely, firstly, the fact that Mikey Madison is not Asian. So that's already the first problem there. But that's what this is ultimately. And again, this is tying into James Cameron's comments as well, where people complain about movie lengths as well, the fact that movies are too long. You and I have been talking about this as well the last couple of years, where people are complaining about movies that are too long, but then James Cameron, very rightfully so, has come out and said, oh, so you were going to complain about the length of my movie, which is only about 3 hours, which there have been plenty of movies in the past that have been 3 hours long, but you're going to go and straight binge a season of Stranger Things, which I've said before, he's 100% right on that. People who complain about the length of movies that are between 3 and 4 hours long, but will then go and binge 8 to 9 hours of a TV show back to back are full of shit. So that's the first thing. And as far as the whole idea, as far as why theaters are even going for this in the first place, I'm kind of a fan of them experimenting around and trying to go for different avenues, different lenses. I've often said before, and it's funny too, because that also ties into one of the other things that has come out from CinemaCon, which is when asked kind of what theaters should do to, again, try and incentivize people to actually come out and see movies in theaters, is bring back the 45-day theatrical window, which the fact that they haven't done that yet is still kind of silly, if you ask me, because you're just shooting yourself in the foot, because not only have you trained an entire audience to not go to the theaters and watch movies in theaters because of COVID, but also now that people are finally willing to come out and watch movies in theaters again, albeit not in the numbers that they used to, but they are willing to do it. But now what you're telling them is, oh, you don't even need to, because the movie is going to be available for streaming in 2 weeks. So why would you even want to go and see it in the theaters then if you could just pay for it at home? At least if it's a 45-day theatrical window, you at least give it some time to at least recoup a bit of its box office. That's part of the other reason why so many of these movies are bombing in theaters. But in terms of, again, creating a whole new type of theatrical experience that is really different from anything we've seen, I'm kind of game for it. And I'm at least interested to see it. Even if it fails completely, I'm still of the mind of where at least you're taking a risk. At least you're taking a chance. And I've said this before, I am always going to be in favor of things that take a big swing and miss, as opposed to just playing it the same way and just becoming more and more progressively dull and going back to the drawing board and saying, oh, this works, And as far as the casting goes, I'm like, I don't care, because we already again, 3 of these 4 guys were basically confirmed last year. It was just the George Harrison role that people were still, kind of rumored about. So that's kind of my take on the whole Beatles thing. Again, it's a whole new thing that we've never seen before, and I'm interested to see it, even if it doesn't work ultimately. And it just sucks that we still got to wait 3 years for it, because again, these movies are not going to be in theaters until April of 2028. I was at least hoping for them to be next year, but again, given the vast size and the scope, and I've had to guess, they're still probably trying to figure out what the movies are going to look like narratively and creatively. So that's kind of my whole take on the Beatles thing. The other big takeaway was obviously, again, the big Spider-Man back-to-back announcements. We got the confirmation of the title of the 4th Spider-Man movie starring Tom Holland and Zendaya and Jacob Batalon and Sadie Sink, who was confirmed also this past week. That will be directed by Destin Daniel Cretton. It will be released 2 months after Avengers Doomsday next year. Spider-Man, brand new day. Tom Holland also, again, has not been confirmed to be appearing in Doomsday. The rumors that both him and Doctor Strange will not be in this movie, although I'm more inclined to think he will be. I don't think Doctor Strange will be in this movie. And then also the announcement that Spider-Man Beyond the long-awaited Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, which was delayed, obviously, again, because of the amount of extensive behind-the-scenes animation work that goes into it, will officially be released June 4th. Opening weekend, the same release day slot that Across the Spider-Verse was 2 years ago, 2027. So by the time that this movie comes out, it will have been 4 years since Across the Spider-Verse. It will have been 9 years since Into the Spider-Verse, the first instance in this trilogy. So what was your take on those announcements?
I'm quite scared of the word day now, because I'm just already theorizing what the 5th and 6th one are going to be called.
Just something with the word day in it. That's going to be in all of the. Oh, well, no, sorry. It was home in the first trilogy. This first trilogy was the home trilogy, and now this new trilogy is going to be the day trilogy.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what one more day, one last day. But yeah, I'm just glad that we have a title. That it gives us a slight indicator on what it would be. I briefly read what that story is. It's basically the sort of the aftermath of what No Way Home was. So, very excited for that. We're already seeing the casting rumors that Mr. Negative is kind of being rumored for that one. And I'm just glad that the Spider-Verse movie exists. It will be released. We're not in this eternal limbo of there's no date. There's no date. There's no moving forward. Like we have a first look. Those 4 or 5 pictures, and
Yes,
we have a
and
date.
man,
Like,
that concept art looks incredible.
yeah, I'm like, okay, 2027.
Yeah.
That's fine. Like,
Yes.
it's not 2029,
Exactly.
which we speculated it might
Thankfully.
be, but
Yeah, I was worried that it was going to be 2029, but still, it's just so funny how when these movies started with Into the Spider-Verse, I was 21 and you were, let me do the math here. You were what, 14, 15 when that first Into the Spider-Verse movie came out?
it was 18. I was 16.
16, yeah. And then by the time that this new movie comes out, I will be turning 30 and you will be turning 25, which is hilarious. It's just the fact that
So we get Secret Wars.
Yeah, so that's the other thing too that I'm glad you brought up. We in a row, back-to-back month, we're getting Secret Wars in May, we're getting Beyond the Spider-Verse in June, and we're getting Brand New Day in July. So back to, and there's a potential.
No, Brand New Day is the year before.
No, these are all in 2027. Oh, sorry, you're right. Fuck, in 2026. Damn it, you're right.
We get the Batman in.
We get the Batman. You're right. That's
and probably some other DC stuff.
Yes, I'm getting my dates mixed up. But the other thing too also is something like, and there's potential with all the multiverse hopping that we're going to see in these movies that all those movies could somehow tie together, you know, which would be absolutely insane. And there's also ties into Phil Lord and Chris Miller as well, because in addition to Beyond the Spider-Verse, we also, even though it has not been released yet, Amazon MGM revealed their first look at Project Hail Mary. And from what I've heard, the description, just based off the description of the footage alone, it sounds like it's going to be incredible. Where Ryan Gosling is a science teacher. Again, you did read the book for Project Hail Mary?
I'll read it again, and they spoiled the biggest twist in the book. I'm like, oh,
which is that he's not, which is that
damn
he's a high school scientist.
Damn marketing people, like you just had to. Like,
that's disappointing.
Wait, what do you say?
That he's a high school science teacher?
No, that's the premise.
Oh,
like,
I
must have.
I must have missed it. I don't remember.
You'll see it in the trailer.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking forward to it once the trailer comes. But what was your take on that as a Andy Weir fan and as a fan obviously of Ryan Gosling and this upcoming movie and space movies?
I'm just glad that people think it looks good. Like I was like, okay, like there's no reason for that it wouldn't be good. Like you've got Drew Goddard who did the screenplay for The Martian. You've got Lord and Miller who are just comedic geniuses, and it is a very comedic book, and Ryan Gosling is a very comedic actor. He's very perfectly cast for that. So yeah, I can't wait to see the trailer in like 6 months or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, people had a lot of good things to say about the Amazon panel. Like it was one of the better ones. Which is interesting. They just announced a lot of stuff.
Yeah, which is interesting because again, Amazon, one of the few studios that doesn't have a lot of IP. I mean, they've got The Boys, but that's ending. They've got Invincible, but that's again only a TV show. As far as movies and their stuff go, like again, people were really excited. Again, some of the other announcements: Guy Ritchie directing Roadhouse 2, which I think is really fascinating. Michael B. Jordan producing, directing, and starring in a remake of the Thomas Crown Affair. This will be the second remake of this after the Pierce Brosnan one, which I feel like is the one that a lot of people are the most familiar with, the one that was released in 1999. Couple other ones kind of escape me, but yeah, for the most part, Amazon, it seems like we're low-key the winners from CinemaCon. You know, the Disney stuff, it was kind of whatever. I know a lot of people were questioning the Superman footage when that dropped. I'm still holding out hope, pun intended, to see once the movie actually is released. Personally, the Sony presentation, again, people did not get a good chance to view their two kind of big award, kind of artist awards drops. Kogonoda's Big Bold Beautiful Journey with Margot Robbie and Colin Farrell, and Darren Aronofsky's Caught Stealing with Austin Butler and Matt Smith. Those are both two movies that I'm very, very much looking forward to. I don't care what people are saying about it, because I very much like those two directors, and I will watch anything that those two do. And the stars and premises of both of those movies are enough to get me interested. My personal two favorite trailers, and I want to see what your thoughts on this are, that came out of this. Tron Ares, which, again, for a movie to a sequel to one of my favorite movies of the last decade, for a movie that, again, has a cast that kept making me go, huh? With the reveals of who was going to be in the movie, and also with the director that especially made me go, yikes. That being Joaquin Roning, the director of the 5th Pirates of the Caribbean movie. That just made me go, yikes. Big yikes there. I gotta say, the trailer and footage of what we got, also the fact that 9 Inch Nails, not Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, 9 Inch Nails is doing the score for it, I was blown away. I was blown the fuck away. I cannot wait. I have needed Tron back in my life for 15 years now. I can't believe that it's been 15 years since that movie came out, That movie still has one of the most revolutionary looks. That movie revolutionized. It is a crime against humanity that it was not nominated for visual effects or score, that Daft Punk score, when it came out in 2010. I wanted to know, what were your thoughts on the trailer? I don't remember if you and I have had the Tron discussion. I feel like we have, but just refresh my memory, because, again, I'm slowly losing it day by day.
Well, I don't know who you've had that discussion with, because I have not seen either.
Okay, so I wasn't crazy there.
I've not seen either Tron film yet. This is the best possible excuse to do that. I watched it. I know people are kind of questioning, like, why are we bringing it into the real world? I guess we'll find out.
Well, for anybody who's watched Tron Legacy, who knows where that movie was going, it's like, this seems like the logical next step for the programs to make their way into the real world, just from a narrative standpoint.
It looks cool.
Yes.
Like, that's all that I really can take away from it right now without knowing much about the story. It looks cool. And for me, often enough, that's enough to get me through the door.
Yeah, definitely. And like just the sound, the visuals. Again, the fact that it's been 15 years since that last Tron movie, which, again, I strongly, the original Tron from the 80s, I'm like, it's all right. It's whatever. But just because the effects were hokey, that was the classic example of a movie that was trying for something that was way ahead of its time, and one of the few instances where it just doesn't work ultimately. But Tron Legacy, man, that movie, it is scintillating is the word that I will use. Like the Daft Punk score, the look, the feel. I geek out about that movie, because it's one of those movies where, again, it was kind of forgotten about and slept on. And then I rewatched it for the first time since I'd seen it in theaters, which I remember loving it when I saw it in theaters during COVID. And blew my socks off. Like, I was crying, I was laughing, I was geeking. It's really, really, really good. Really slept on. Heavily, heavily recommend that one. And my other favorite trailer, just because, again, this is an idea that never in a million years should have worked. And the fact that not only is it working, but the fact that it looks as good as it does. My second favorite batch of comedic geniuses outside of Lord Miller, The Lonely Island, doing a remake of The Naked Gun, was not something I had in my 2025 bingo card, but they released that first trailer, and automatically I'm like, I'm in. Just like the fact that I told this to my friend, who at first was like, this is stupid, but then I told him, The Lonely Island is doing it. He didn't even need to see the trailer. He's like, I'm in. I'm automatically in. The fact that, just to give you guys a breakdown of what this trailer is, it opens with a 5-year-old girl walking into the middle of like an armed hostage bank robbery situation, unzipping it, pulling off the mask, Mission Impossible style, to reveal it to be Liam Neeson, who then proceeds to kill all the guards, turns to the camera, and is like, I'm Frank Drebin, Police Squad, the new version. And then the next footage is just a line of cops, all being like, oh, I miss you, Dad. Liam Neeson's looking at Leslie Nielsen, Paul Walter House is looking at George Kennedy, and you have the one black cop looking at a picture of OJ, turns to the camera, shakes his head, is like, nah, I'm in. I'm automatically in this. Like, you don't need to sell me on anything else. I don't need to see any other bit of footage. I am so in. It's coming out in my birthday month, August, which, again, looks to be an absolute dead zone for movies now since they pushed the Paul Thomas Anderson movie, One Battle After Another, into September. What were your thoughts on that trailer alone?
After hundreds of viewers last year, we need more shit posting in our movies.
We really do.
This is the perfect follow-up to that. Like, just the visual of the little girl being Liam Neeson, like, it doesn't work logically, but like, it's great. Like, I've seen a lot of Naked Gun clips out of context. I will sit down and watch at least the first one.
You're gonna only need to watch the first one. You don't need to watch the sequels. Yeah. They're not good.
And then yeah, like Liam Neeson, like he can be like a very comedic actor if given the right thing. So yeah, just let them shitpost all over the place.
Yes,
like, it'll be great.
It's so good. I can't wait. I can't wait. I think this has become my most anticipated movie for the rest of the summer, and that's including a summer that includes the likes of, again, Superman, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, Fantastic Four, what's it called? F1, all the other 28 years later, all the other movies that we talked about a couple weeks ago. And I'm like, nah, I'm kind of looking forward to this movie more than any of the rest of them, just because it's going to be so silly and so stupid. And like, again, it's kind of like a throwback to like my favorite kinds of comedies, which, again, I'm not a fan of the Apatow just making dick jokes in like every 5 seconds. I like, again, the silly, nonsensical, doesn't quite make sense, but somehow just through the power of movies, it works, which, again, is what made those, again, it really does seem to be a throwback and paying homage, which, again, is part of the reason why I've always loved guys like The Lonely Island, like Phil Lord and Chris Miller, where, again, they pay homage to like those types of 80s comedies, which again, the Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams were famous for. The Top Secrets, the Naked Guns, the airplanes and such. Those were always my favorite kinds of the police academies. Those were always my favorite comedies, where again, it was just, they were taking the material so seriously, but the visual sight gags are just so ridiculous nonstop. What are the Charlie Sheen ones that I'm totally forgetting the names of? They did 2 of them, but the second one,
Team America.
no, not that one. It's
Is the Top Gun one?
Yeah, the Top Gun one. Oh my god. Hold on. I'm looking it up right now because I'm actually mad. Hot Shots. That's it. Hot Shots Part 2 is kind of like that as well, which is ripping off like all the action movies like Rambo and such. There's a great bit at the beginning of Hot Shots where Charlie Sheen is on a raft and he's passing by Martin Sheen, his dad, on the raft from Apocalypse Now, and they're trading in barbs back and forth. That was great. So yeah, I can't wait for Naked Gun Part 2. Now the other 2 big bits of news, unfortunately, the fact that they're making another John Wick movie, not only a John Wick 5 that Keanu and Chad Stahelski are coming back for, but an anime prequel.
Just make it supernatural, please.
Yeah, at this point, yeah,
put them in hell. Bring everyone back from the first 4 movies.
Yes, because I'm like, with the way that 4 ended, I'm like, I wasn't the biggest fan of 4. 4 is probably still my least favorite of the Wick movies, but at the very least, it provided like a solid ending to that franchise, even though it was so ludicrous by that point to the comparison of 1. That now, again, Ballerina's cool because I'm like, okay, that shows that you can explore other characters in this universe, even if the director choice scares me. But with this one, it's like, okay, so he is back. I'm like, okay, so they're just going to keep doing this until Keanu literally physically can't do this. This is his, like, Mission Impossible now. And I'm like, all right. I'm just like, whatever. After 4 kind of left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth, I'm like, whatever. That's kind of my only response to that. So the other 2 big bits of news that dropped this week solo, independent of CinemaCon. Do you want to do Val Kilmer first, or do you want to do the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood news first?
Let's do Kilmer first.
Yeah, because we talked about Top Secrets. This kind of does tie in. Man, this was a rough one. This was a really, really rough one. I don't know what it is about this year, and like there haven't been that many celebrity deaths yet, but the ones who have died so far, not only has it been under like the most bizarre circumstances, but it's just been people who were just like these icons that when they passed, it was really, really sad. First with David Lynch, where he tragically passed because of smoke inhalation from the wildfires. Then Gene Hackman, who even though he was very old and had been retired for several years, was again this titan of cinema that had all this love and adoration of outpouring, and also died under very, very bizarre circumstances. We had another really tragic death. Val Kilmer passed this week at 65. Again, you saw his overall health, how he battled and survived throat cancer. Just in general, he looked like he was not doing too well in general. So I can't say it's that much of a surprise, but still, this was a tough one. Again, really, really an icon of cinema that people would look at and say never really got his just desserts, despite the fact that he was very, very well beloved by people both within the industry and by movie fans alike. Again, some absolutely unbelievable, spectacular movies. Just off the top of my head, again, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is one of my absolute favorites. Heat, Top Secret, Top Gun, The Doors, Real Genius. I know I'm forgetting Tombstone, an iconic one as well. Like so many. Willow, Matt Mardigan, his role in that. Also, again, one of a few people to play Batman in Batman Forever. Again, somebody who is regarded as being one of the better Batman in one of the worst Batman movies. I am famously also somebody who I dislike Batman Forever more than Batman and Robin. And the reason being is because Batman Forever, I think, is still trying to be serious, but it's in complete conjunction with Joel Schumacher's style, what he's doing with that movie, as opposed to Batman and Robin, which knows that it's silly and knows that it's a cartoon, which is the thing that everybody kind of misunderstood about that. But yeah, this was a tough one, to say the least. This is one of those ones where it's like, I can even tell my parents, and even they, because again, my parents both love Top Gun and have seen almost all the movies that Val Kilmer was in, because again, he was just one of those guys that was in every movie that I feel like our parents knew and grew up with, and he really was like a once in a generation type of talent. So this one was really sad. Really, really sad.
Yeah, I've seen a decent number of Val Kilmer movies, your Batmans, your Heats, your Top Guns, and I think his appearance in Top Gun kind of said everything there is to say about him as a performer. Like no matter his condition, he can show up and give a very emotional performance. He kind of almost becomes the emotional core of that movie through his one scene. Well, obviously he's had more than just that role, and he's always been great in whatever I've seen him. So yeah, it's sad to see him
Yeah.
pass.
And also, again, the fact that he was so still, even despite, again, there's this incredible documentary that they did basically about how, again, his throat cancer basically robbed him of the ability to act ultimately, and the fact that he was still around, he was still kicking. He was one of those guys that for a while, like the Chris Tuckers, like the, one of those iconic 90s stars. And everybody's kind of like, what happened to him? He was still going hot. Like even in as recently as like 2010, he was in, he was famously the villain in the live action MacGruber movie with Will Forte. He was working with Francis Ford Coppola, and everybody's kind of like, what happened? Where'd he go? And then you find out that like, yeah, he was dealing with this cancer that literally robbed him of the ability to speak ultimately. And like you were saying with Top Gun, again, I've gone out of my way to say that, again, as much as I made fun of the legacy of Top Gun and how that movie is not as good as people make it out to be, it's more so, again, just the fact that it came out in the time that it did is why it had the impact that it did. And even though I'm not a fan of Top Gun Maverick the way that certain people are, that scene with Cruise and Kilmer in that movie was enough to almost put me over the line and be like, wow, that scene was so good that it almost made me completely turn around on that movie where, again, you have these two characters that have shared decades of friendship together and you see what's happened with one versus the other, but they have this one moment to like kind of come together again and reminisce while also being like kind of, passing the torch of being like, there's this kind of collective knowledge of Kilmer almost knowing that he's like, yeah, I'm not going to be around that much longer. So you have to be the one to kind of, for lack of a better word, carry on the torch in my stead. And it was this really poignant, heartfelt moment. And now 3 years later, he's died. It's one of those weird instances where you almost feel like celebrities kind of understood that their time was coming to an end and were able to foretell it by giving something like that on screen. To me, it reminds me a lot of, I don't know if you've seen the American Tail animated movies. So not the first one in American Tail, but the sequel, An American Tail 5 Goes West. Famously, it was one of Jimmy Stewart's final roles before he passed, where he voices the, what's it called? I can't remember the name of it. I got to look it up because I don't want to butcher these names. So in the movie An American Tail 5 Goes West, Fievel is kind of iconizing this one figure of the Old West. What's it called? It's a little bit of a parody. This dog, he wants to recruit him in order to help him fight off these cats. And it's voiced by, the dog is voiced by Jimmy Stewart, this character named Wiley Burr. And he ends up finding him. And of course, he's old and broken down. But of course, he manages to motivate him to come and help them deal with the cats as well. The evil cat in the movie is voiced by John Cleese. It's a very funny instance. But the movie ends with this very somber, heartfelt monologue of, delivered beautifully by Jimmy Stewart, where he kind of, again, is acknowledging his mortality and kind of the fading of the West. And then a few years later, the movie was released in 91, and I believe that Jimmy Stewart passed only a few years later in 97. So, again, it was kind of another one of those instances where this celebrity was kind of becoming aware of their mortality and understanding that they didn't have that much time left. And so they were kind of contributing, their acknowledgement of that to the world. And I feel like Kilmer was doing that in Top Gun Maverick, which I feel like is part of the reason why that moment feels so poignant and why it hurts so much more. The fact that he did end up dying only 3 years after the movie's release. So that's kind of all I really wanted to say about that. Again, it's very, very sad. It makes me worried, honestly, for the rest of this year as far as like what other beloved celebrities we're going to lose. To me, it's 2016 all over again, where it was a combination of we lost so many icons that year. David Bowie, Alan Rickman, Prince, Gary Shandling. And then you also had some absolutely tragically bizarre out of nowhere deaths, like Anton Yelchin getting run over by his own car, which he forgot to put in park or because there was a malfunction with it. Like shit like that is still, less said the better. And then the other bit of news that came out before we'll wrap up and get out of here, this really shows that we are truly living in a bizarre, we are living in Tropic Thunder. That is what this movie news confirms to me, where again, just the most bizarre, wacky, batshit, insane thing that anybody could think of. And Hollywood was also a little bit clever when they revealed it, where they purposefully revealed this news on April 1st, knowing that everybody was going to think, oh, this is an April Fool's Day prank. There's no way this is actually happening. A sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's infamous 9th movie, released in 2019, a year before the pandemic, which finally won Brad Pitt his Oscar, is coming back in a way. There's a sequel being made that is written by Tarantino based off of a Tarantino script where, again, he was going to do this one movie called The Movie Critic, which was going to star Brad Pitt. It was going to have a lot of ties with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He realized that he was kind of just reliving the glory days of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He didn't want that to be his final movie, so he threw out the draft and said he was no longer doing it. And instead, he is handing over his script ideas that he wrote for this potential sequel that will be centered around Brad Pitt's character, Cliff Booth, to be directed by none other than David Fincher. It will go directly to Netflix. I'm still processing this news, the fact that this is even happening, because again, there's so many different things and avenues with which that we can examine it. I was literally even having this conversation with another guy, with John Maffio on Instagram the other day about like what this means both for Tarantino's career and the movies phase. Like, what were your thoughts on this when this news was released?
Well, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is like a top 10 all-time movie for me at this point. I've seen it like a comical amount of times. Like I watched it a month apart, like last year, I think. Just like it's like the perfect background movie. Like you're just hanging out with characters. And if Tarantino's not doing the sequel, I'm like, why? I'm not interested. And what's worse is David Fincher with Netflix. And David Fincher with Netflix has not been the David Fincher of past. So I'm like, ugh. And Leo, if he's back, he's gonna be like in a cameo. Like, okay, what's the point? The whole dynamic between him and Cliff Booth is like one of the main reasons why that movie works as well as it does. So yeah, I just have to see a trailer if it looks competent enough, because it is a Tarantino script at the very least. But I don't know, it's like a Tarantino script with Fincher directing. Like it seems like the total opposite of a David Fincher.
Right, exactly. It's very kind of conflicting visions, if you will. And so a couple things that I'm going to throw at you as well. So Tarantino famously has written scripts that have been directed by other people before. True Romance obviously is the most notable example. The fact that, again, he wrote this script. It was his first script, I believe, before Reservoir Dogs. And then his idol in film world, Tony Scott, has gone out of his way to say how much he loves and adores Tony Scott and his work. His idol, Tony Scott, ends up directing his own script. So that's one thing. He also famously wrote the script for Natural Born Killers and famously, I believe, disowned the movie after Oliver Stone, in his words, butchered his script. I haven't seen Natural Born Killers. I haven't read the script. That was always going to be my thing, is that I was going to watch Natural Born Killers and then I was going to read the original Tarantino script and see what Oliver Stone changed from the movie. And famously, again, Tarantino hated what Oliver Stone did with that script so much that he never let anybody direct a script of his ever again, famously after that. From Dusk Till Dawn doesn't count. That was like a collaboration with Robert Rodriguez. That was primarily a Robert Rodriguez movie and script. So that one doesn't count. But so notably the first time that Tarantino will be letting somebody else take the reins of a script that he wrote since in over 30 years, since Natural Born Killers. That's the first thing. The second thing, again, is the fact that, again, it is going directly to Netflix. Tarantino has worked with Netflix sort of before. He famously let them re-release The Hateful Eight as a 4-part miniseries with added additional footage, which from what I've been told by people who I have not seen it, but from what I've been told by people who have seen it, is that is the proper version of The Hateful Eight, which I think is already pretty insane considering that I already love The Hateful Eight to begin with. A lot more than I feel like a lot of other Tarantino fans. I'm kind of like on a little bit of the opposite end of Tarantino fans. I love The Hateful Eight. I'm not the biggest fan of Jackie Brown, which I feel like is the opposite take of what a lot of people consider. So that's the second thing. The third thing is that Tarantino has stated that he would be willing to work with something with Netflix before. But I don't know what the status of that is. Again, also the fact that, again, Tarantino has said that he wants to focus more on writing books, on doing stage play adaptations of his movies before, the fact that he wants to focus more on being a dad. And he said famously that after kind of the movie critic fell apart, that he wanted to focus and take some time away and really wait until his son was old enough to be able to appreciate movies, that he would be able to kind of like bring his son to set and like kind of introduce him to the kind of movie world. And that would be kind of his final movie, his swan song. You know, famously, obviously, everybody knows about how he's only talked about doing 10 movies. I also have this sneaking suspicion that he wished that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood had been his 10th movie, but because he considers Kill Bill one movie, it's only his 9th. So I think that's another thing as well to consider. The other thing also is the fact that, again, you're right, the fact that Fincher on Netflix is not, at least with movies, has not been the Fincher that he was prior to it.
Oh, we're getting the Squid Game remake from him.
Right. So that's the thing, is that all of Fincher's projects post on Netflix. Again, I love the first 2 seasons of House of Cards and what he was able to do with that. And essentially, Fincher is the guy who revolutionized television and basically made Netflix what it is with those first 2 seasons of House of Cards. The last couple of seasons of House of Cards, notwithstanding, but the first 2 seasons of House of Cards, some of the greatest television that has ever been made. Also, it's so weird and disconcerting that Kevin Spacey didn't have the Southern accent for the first couple of seasons. But all of that being said, yeah, this is weird because, again, Fincher is the total opposite kind of a director than Tarantino is. Not to mention the fact that Tarantino famously in the past has gone out of his way to say that Fincher could not do what he did because Fincher is solely a director. He's like, Fincher is a director. Fincher doesn't write his own scripts. I write and direct my own script. So Fincher is never going to have the kind of take on my stories, on my characters that I would, as somebody who is inherently aware and tune into these characters because it's my writing, it's my dialogue. I'm kind of the engineer, the auteur from the beginning, as opposed to somebody who's like just taking and interpreting somebody else's writing and somebody else's script. And of course, you could take all that where you will. Again, obviously, each director is great and ingenious in their own right, but these are his words that he said. So I do find it interesting that he's trusting somebody like Fincher as somebody who has previously been so very precious of his own work in the past. So that's kind of my whole take on it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, and again, we don't know when this film will even see the light of day. Obviously, again, I'm still kind of the guy that I'm still waiting to see what Tarantino's final film is going to be ultimately. That's kind of still the thing that really has some interest for me. And the fact that who knows when we're even going to get that. It was always previously we had to wait about 4 to 5 years in between for his movies before, but yeah. So I'm interested. I'm curious to see what it's going to be, what it's going to look like. But other than that, yeah. This is weird to say the least. And again, it was very, very specific on Hollywood's part that they released this news on April 1st of all days. So, like I said, we're into quarter 2 now. Quarter 1 is over. New batch of movies. New hopefully things on the horizon. We have a lot to look forward to in these next couple of years where we'll see where that takes us. But obviously, again, for the most part, you guys can keep coming back and watching us as we continue to recap Lost and as we start to release these Mission Impossible rewatches. The first one is going up tomorrow. I have it scheduled. Luke, did you get I sent it to you, so you should have gotten it by now. So that'll also be on Luke's channel as well, so you guys can watch it on both channels as well.
Watch it twice.
You can watch it twice.
Recommend it.
Yes, as well. There's also a longer version as well that YouTube did not allow me to put up because of potential copyright strikes. That one's more of a commentary, and it's not as and it's a little bit more polished and nuanced. So if you guys want to watch that one, I may or may not include a link to that one in the description that you may be able to watch on Vimeo as well. So there's all of that. Luke, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
They can follow me at Luke Reviews. I'm kind of remolding what I want my Mission Impossible videos to be. I think I might do 1 to 4 as like how it evolved into what it is now, and then 5 to 8 into how it became this and evolved the mythos of the IMF and Ethan Hunt. So I'm working on that.
Yes, absolutely. I can't wait to see those videos. They're going to be good. And of course, you guys can follow me with everything going on at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Official Talkin TV Podcast across all platforms. Subscribe, follow us. This episode will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts tomorrow. You guys know the rest. We'll see you guys next week for another episode of Talkin' Lost. See ya.